Rich millionaire tries to hide affair at restaurant, but pregnant wife finds him with mistress. In the hushed ambience of the exclusive Le Serene restaurant, where celebrities hobnob with the world's wealthiest elite, a single table in the far corner glowed under a discreet halo of light. Patrons whispered while peering curiously at Julian Rothwell, a billionaire rumored to be the next Warren Buffett of the tech world. His presence exuded mystery until that night. Few had glimpsed him in public with anyone but his elegant, pregnant wife, Serena, yet on this particular evening he was not seated with his wife. A striking, unknown woman leaned toward him, her eyes bright with secrets that threatened to explode. Julian Rothwell was a man who existed in the nexus of power and scandal. Born into a wealthy family, he grew his inheritance into an empire that sprawled across tech startups, real estate ventures, and philanthropic endeavors. By the age of 35, the media had already dubbed him the next big thing in global finance. His father, Henry Rothwell, famously socialized with the likes of Richard Branson and Elon Musk at exclusive retreats in Davos, Switzerland. Julian followed suit by rubbing elbows with titans, such as Bill Gates at philanthropic galas, forging connections that catapulted his business forward in quantum leaps. Despite his staggering net worth, Julian always maintained a carefully polished public image. He was known not just for his money, but for his seemingly solid moral compass. Well-spoken and charming, he donated millions to children's hospitals, including the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and Boston Children's Hospital. Reporters found it easy to paint him as a philanthropic playboy with a heart of gold. Whenever asked about family, his warm grin and casual mention of "my wonderful wife Serena" seemed to confirm that behind the vast empire was a loving husband ready to become a father. Serena Delacroix Rothwell, an heir to an old French wine dynasty, was a picture of refinement. She was half French, half American, and fully mesmerizing. A petite woman with dough-brown eyes and a natural grace, she had captured Julian's heart during a chance meeting in Paris. The tabloids breathlessly covered their fairy tale wedding at a centuries-old chateau in the Loire Valley, featuring photos of the bride's gown by a leading Parisian designer. In all those pictures, Julian looked like he was worshipping the ground she walked on. Now, nearly 2 years into their marriage, Serena was 7 months pregnant, radiating that glow that mothers carry. Yet with each passing day, she felt Julian slip away inch by inch. It was more than just the typical burdens of a high-profile job. Julian was often absent, claiming urgent business across continents, from a new tech startup in Silicon Valley to a budding real estate project in Tokyo. And whenever she confronted him about the complexity of being left behind, he offered carefully packaged explanations delivered with a well-practiced charm. Still, the seeds of doubt had already been planted in Serena's heart. She saw the shift in Julian's mannerisms, something intangible and yet so obvious to a wife who recognized every tilt of his head and nuance of his speech. The phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, or the endless text messages that elicited mysterious smiles, these little signs pointed to the unsettling possibility that Julian might be hiding something. On that fateful evening at Le Serene, Julian thought he would be safe. The renowned chef, Eric Ripert, was rumored to be in town, and the city's upper crust, including world-famous personalities, were rumored to frequent the restaurant. Little did Julian know that beneath Le Serene's sumptuous facade, a storm of suspicions and half-truths was about to erupt. Even more surprising, his pregnant wife had decided to book a private dinner at the very same establishment that night, determined to confirm or quell the haunting uncertainties in her mind. Le Serene was not just any restaurant. It was a temple of taste that combined the refinement of French cuisine with the edgy creativity of modern culinary trends. Soft golden lighting fell upon linen-draped tables, while the faint hush of whispered conversations intermingled with the polished sound of silverware sliding across porcelain plates. Julian arrived earlier than usual, accompanied by a leggy brunette in a sleek black dress that exposed just enough to spark curiosity. Camilla Hawthorne, an up-and-coming interior designer known to the design world's elite, had a reputation for capturing attention wherever she went. She was an unexpected fixture at the side of a married man whose pristine public reputation was built around loyalty and integrity. For months, Camilla had been riding high on the wave of her successes, a contract to redesign the lobbies of Julian's luxury hotels, followed by invitations to soirees and philanthropic events in which the Rothwell brand was a sponsor. Rumors swirled that Julian had personally recommended her to certain industry bigwigs, ensuring her career soared. That night, the hush-hush arrangement was to discuss design expansions for the new resorts, or so the official story went. Yet, the tension in Camilla's voice, coupled with the adoring gleam in her eyes, hinted that this late dinner was far from a straightforward business meeting. Julian tried to maintain an air of calm as they settled into a private booth near the back, away from the public gaze. Their table was adorned with fresh roses, and an overpriced vintage wine, chilled to a perfect temperature, sat within arm's reach. Every detail was arranged to create a sense of exclusivity and hush, something that on any other night might have gone unnoticed. Yet, unbeknownst to Julian, Serena had arrived at Le Serine a mere 10 minutes earlier. She was seated 2 tables away, hidden by an ornate partition, accompanied only by her childhood friend and loyal confidant, Margot Lefebvre. Margot was someone Serena trusted implicitly, a steadfast friend who flew in from Bordeaux upon hearing the trembling anxiety in Serena's voice. Although pregnant, Serena insisted on investigating the suspected affair on her own. Margot, out of concern for her friend's fragile state, had reluctantly agreed to accompany her. As Serena sipped water, wine was off the table for her these days, and forced herself to scan the menu. Her hands trembled. She half hoped to see nothing amiss. Maybe the swirl of suspicion and jealousy was all in her head. Then the staff quietly escorted Julian and Camilla through the restaurant. In that split second, the tiny cracks of doubt in Serena's world fissured into a chasm. She watched as her husband seated an elegant woman far younger than he, leaning in close to whisper something that made the woman laugh. The expression of complete adoration on Julian's face was something that Serena had not seen from him in a long time. The effect was shattering. A swirl of shock, anger, and heartbreak churned in her, making her breath hitch. Margot grabbed her hand under the table, alarmed that her worst fears had come true in a matter of seconds. Never in her life had Serena felt such anguish. She realized she couldn't simply jump out of her seat and confront them, not with the eyes of high society upon them. Above all, she knew that any public outburst could harm the child she carried, not to mention risk humiliating her entire family. Instead, she vowed to watch quietly, to piece the puzzle together, before deciding her next move. Little did she know that the next few hours would bring an explosive unraveling of truths that would shake every foundation upon which her life was built. Julian and Camilla, oblivious to being watched, allowed themselves the luxury of soft conversation peppered with flirtatious gestures. The wine in front of Camilla seemed to give her courage. Her laughter grew more carefree as the minutes ticked by, and Julian occasionally placed a hand over hers, a stolen touch that made both hearts flutter. Serena's table, though just steps away, felt like a different universe. Time moved painfully slowly for her. She dissected their every move, the arch of Camilla's eyebrow, the angle of Julian's leaning torso, and the dreamy tone of their hushed voices. Each detail weighed upon her heart like a boulder. It was beyond doubt, Julian was deeply, intimately involved with this woman. Margot wanted to stand up and drag Serena out of that painful scene. She whispered, "You don't need to watch more." But Serena insisted on staying. Some part of her needed confirmation beyond measure, needed to face the betrayal head-on. No illusions, no half-truths. If her husband was truly seeing another woman while she carried his child, then there would be no more reason to cling to false hopes of marital bliss. Across the room, the restaurant's manager, clearly recognizing Julian Rothwell, approached the couple to personally ensure their comfort. Camilla, in her starry-eyed excitement, mentioned the possibility of traveling to one of Julian's new beach resorts in Hawaii. Julian's eyes flickered with a mixture of caution and delight. He motioned for secrecy, but the manager merely bowed away with a smile, used to overhearing delicate negotiations. None of them had any inkling that Serena was near enough to hear every syllable. In that moment, Serena's thoughts churned. Had Julian taken Camilla on secret getaways? Was this the first time, or one of many? The last time Serena and Julian had a vacation together was months ago to Lake Como, when she was barely entering her second trimester. Even then, Julian had seemed distant, spending hours on the phone explaining that an important investor named Alexander Pierce might be pulling out of a major real estate deal. She had accepted his excuses, gullible, or perhaps just wanting to believe that their marriage was beyond the petty heartbreak of an affair. At length, Camilla rose from her seat, presumably to visit the restroom. As she glided past the partition where Serena and Margot sat concealed, she accidentally locked eyes with Margot. For a second, Camilla froze. Recognition flickered. Camilla had briefly met Margot at an art gallery event a few months prior, introduced by none other than Julian Rothwell himself. A myriad of expressions crossed Camilla's face: confusion, then the realization of the predicament. Serena, hidden by the partition, prayed to remain unseen. Yet the damage was done. Camilla had recognized Margot, and soon she would piece together that Serena was near. Panic soared in Camilla's veins, and she dashed off to the restroom, heart pounding. A million scenarios hammered in her head. Should she warn Julian? Should she slip out quietly? Was the entire web of secrecy about to come crashing down in a very public way? Meanwhile, Margot locked eyes with Serena. Her grip tightened on her friend's hand as if to say, "Be ready. The confrontation is coming." Camilla stood before the restroom's gilded mirror, her heart racing. She dabbed a bit of cold water on her wrists, hoping it would quell the sudden wave of anxiety. Could it be that Serena was here, only a few feet away, separated by a thin wooden partition? The implications were staggering. If Serena had overheard even a fragment of their conversation, the entire facade that Julian meticulously built could unravel. She recalled the earlier days of her involvement with Julian. At first, she had dismissed the possibility of romance, focusing solely on the business side: her design projects, the brand collaborations, the philanthropic events. But the lines blurred when Julian offered her an all-expenses-paid trip to his ski lodge in Aspen under the guise of finalizing interior designs. One evening, a shared bottle of wine led to laughter, confessions, and ultimately an embrace that changed everything. Both had justified it as a moment of weakness, never to be repeated. But as days turned into weeks and the spark between them grew, they found themselves drawn deeper into an affair that demanded continuous layers of secrecy. Back at the table, Julian began to notice Camilla's protracted absence. Was she unwell or spooked? An uneasy feeling unsettled him. He recalled he had spotted a woman in a red dress earlier who, from behind, looked a lot like Margot Lefebvre, a name that spelled trouble if she was indeed here. Margot was fiercely loyal to Serena. If she was around, it likely meant Serena was also near. Within moments, Camilla returned, her eyes flickering with turmoil. She leaned close to Julian and whispered, "We need to leave now." "I just saw Margot." Julian's heart plummeted. He locked his jaw, trying not to draw attention from the surrounding tables. "Are you sure it was her?" he hissed back, scanning the room. He glimpsed the partition, the subtle shape of someone seated behind it, but the angle was too discreet. "If it's Margot, then Serena might be here," he concluded under his breath. Camilla nodded. The swirl of guilt, adrenaline and fear tangled in her stomach. They had been so careful avoiding public entanglements, booking dinners in private rooms, traveling incognito. Now, it seemed all of that caution was undone by sheer coincidence. Or was it fate? Before Julian could slip out quietly, the sommelier approached with their main course, presenting it with the flourishes typical of a Michelin star establishment. To leave abruptly would draw instant attention, especially from the staff accustomed to pampering elite clients. Julian, always measured, forced a smile, thanked the sommelier, and swiftly apologized to Camilla. "Let's at least pretend to eat, we can't storm out." Across the restaurant, Serena's chest tightened. The hush that enveloped Julian and Camilla felt like a vacuum, pulling her deeper into heartbreak. She recognized Julian's mannerisms, his subtle glances around the room, the twitch in his jaw that always gave him away when he was nervous. No matter how calmly he tried to handle the situation, she could sense his alarm. Margot whispered, "This is your last chance to leave quietly. Are you sure you want to do this?" Serena looked at her friend, tears threatening to break free. She shook her head. "I'm going to confront him. I won't let them slip away. Not after this." The finality in her tone was chilling. She might have tolerated half-hidden truths, but seeing the betrayal with her own eyes emboldened her to demand an explanation. The tension in the air was about to escalate into a confrontation that neither Julian nor Camilla could so easily dodge. Slowly, Serena stood from her seat. The trembling in her legs was overshadowed by the raging storm inside her. She placed a protective hand over her belly, acutely aware of the child she carried, an innocent life entangled in this emotional battlefield. Margot rose as well, poised to offer support if needed. Time seemed to slow as Serena walked around the partition, revealing her presence to Julian and Camilla. Her eyes were glassy with tears, her posture unyielding. Julian looked up mid-sentence, and his face drained of color at the sight of his pregnant wife standing before him. "Serena," he blurted, rising halfway from his chair. The single word carried shock, guilt, and 1,000 unspoken apologies. Camilla's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a gasp. Nearby diners, sensing a sudden tension, turned to observe. Some recognized Julian's face from magazine covers. Others, aware of his philanthropic glamour, watched with mounting curiosity. Serena tried to speak, but at first, no words emerged. Her eyes flicked between Julian and Camilla. The discreet hush of the restaurant served as a stage for her heartbreak. She finally managed, "Are you going to introduce me to your guest?" A hush descended, thick enough to cut with a knife. Julian swallowed. "Serena, this isn't what it looks like," he began. The cliché nature of that defense only sharpened Serena's fury. She shook her head, anger blazing in her eyes. "Really? Because from where I was sitting, it looks exactly like you're having a cozy dinner with your mistress." She snapped, voice low but laced with venom. Her words cut through the quiet. Camilla pressed her lips together, tears of humiliation threatening to spill. She fidgeted with her napkin, her composure crumbling. Julian's mind whirled, scanning the room for a graceful exit strategy. "Let's talk about this somewhere private," he insisted. He reached out to grab Serena's arm, but she jerked it away. The movement unsettled her balance, and for a split second she feared for the safety of her unborn child. Margot stepped forward protectively, glaring at Julian. "Don't you dare," she hissed. She had always disliked him, despite his outward charm, and now her suspicions of his character were confirmed. The onlookers, including a couple of recognized faces from the city's social elite, gawked. Whispers spread from table to table. Camera phones were subtly angled, capturing the drama. Even the discreet staff began to panic, unsure how to contain a scandal involving one of their most prominent patrons. Summoning her courage, Serena found her voice. "I deserve an explanation." "Why, Julian? I gave up everything to be with you, my old life in France, my sense of independence. And now I'm carrying your child." Her voice quivered, but the determination remained. "Why would you do this to us?" Julian's eyes filled with regret. He glanced at Camilla, then back at Serena. The illusions he had woven of being the devoted husband, the philanthropic icon, and the unstoppable business mogul were unraveling in real time in front of an audience. Unable to meet Serena's gaze, he mumbled, "It's complicated. Complicated," Serena repeated, letting the word hang in the air. She sniffed, fighting tears. "You know what's complicated, Julian? Being pregnant, alone, thinking your husband is just busy, and then finding out there's another woman. That's complicated." Camilla finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Serena, I'm so sorry." "I never meant." Serena cut her off with a glare. "Save it," she spat. "You both made your choices." The raw pain in Serena's voice resonated, causing even some jaded onlookers to feel pangs of sympathy. Julian sensed the situation spiraling beyond control. He pleaded, "Let's go outside. Talk this through, please." But Serena stood rooted, tears rolling down her cheeks. The facade of their perfect marriage was in shards, scattered across the immaculate floors of Le Serine. The hush that fell upon the restaurant was deafening. People were straining to catch every sentence, glimpsing the front-page drama unfolding in real time. Among the watchers were a few well-known paparazzi magnates, actors, socialites, and high-profile investors. Even chef Eric Reipert, who had arrived earlier to consult with the head chef, was quietly peering from the kitchen entrance, though he wisely stayed out of sight. Trained staff tried to salvage the moment. The restaurant's manager rushed over to offer a private dining room, or perhaps to discreetly settle the check. Julian waved him off, his jaw clenched, focusing solely on Serena. His voice was hoarse with desperation. "Serena, you're trembling. Please, for the baby's sake, let's step outside. Let's talk." But Serena refused to move. Her heartbreak and anger demanded immediate release. She stared him down, her hands trembling, her mind flashing through countless memories, the wedding vow in that French chateau, the first time they held hands in a Parisian garden, the reassurance he gave her just last month about the future. Each recollection felt like a blade slicing her open. Margot, her friend, seemed torn between letting Serena confront Julian publicly and whisking her away from the humiliation. At last, she placed a gentle hand on Serena's shoulder. "He's not worth you collapsing here," Margot muttered in French. "Think of your health." The phrase, "think of your health," brought Serena back to reality. If only for a moment. She was 7 months pregnant after all. The stress was not only endangering her, but also her unborn child. Summoning what remained of her poise, she nodded stiffly. "Fine," she said, her voice cracking. "We'll talk outside." The trio, along with Margot trailing behind, moved through the restaurant. Whispers parted like a sea around them, and all Serena could think about was how many times she had walked into such a place on Julian's arm, proud to be Miss S. Rothwell. Now, she felt the stares of pity, the sting of betrayal plastered across her face. Stepping onto the sidewalk, a gust of cooler night air hit them. The paparazzi that occasionally lingered near upscale spots recognized an unfolding scandal and snapped into action. Cameras flashed. Reporters, alerted by social media posts from diners, rushed to the scene. Within moments, a small throng jostled for positions, shouting questions. "Mr. Rothwell, are you having an affair?" "Mrs. Rothwell, can you confirm the rumors?" It was chaos. Julian tried shielding Serena with his coat, a gesture that might have come off as protective if not for the circumstances. Camilla hovered nearby, her head bowed in shame and fear. Margot closed in protectively on Serena's other side, glaring at the paparazzi. She barked at them to back off, reminding them that Serena was pregnant. A hush fell over the crowd when Serena turned to Camilla, ignoring the cameras. "Do you love him?" she asked, voice raw. Camilla's eyes shimmered with tears. She couldn't speak. In the end, her silence was answer enough. Serena inhaled a shaky breath. "And you," she said, turning her gaze on Julian, "is this who you are now? A liar, or were you always that man, and I was just too blinded by love?" Julian stammered. I didn't intend for you to find out like this." His words were feeble, overshadowed by the relentless flash of cameras capturing his downfall. The timeline of events was out of his control, and the world was watching with bated breath. Under the relentless barrage of camera flashes, Julian's instincts as a high-profile businessman kicked in. He knew the value of spin control. It had saved him from countless corporate fiascos in the past. But this time, the fiasco was personal, laid bare in front of the entire city. His brand, the philanthropic, idealistic entrepreneur, was in shambles. The stock market might not open until the next morning, but he could practically hear the rumor mill churning, anticipating a potential dip in share prices for his ventures as scandal overshadowed success. Serena's eyes brimmed with tears, and her face showed the deep hurt that no PR statement could ever rectify. Every inch of her body tensed as the paparazzi barked invasive questions. Through the chaos, a black SUV with tinted windows screeched up to the curb, one of Julian's drivers. Presumably alerted by the restaurant staff about the commotion, Margot tugged on Serena's arm. "Let's go," she urged, shooting a withering glare at Julian. "You've caused enough pain tonight." Before Julian could protest, Margot led Serena to the waiting SUV. The vehicle sped off, leaving Camilla and Julian behind, swarmed by the press. Realizing the precariousness of the situation, Julian hastily ushered Camilla into another car that arrived a moment later. "We need to get you out of here," he muttered, ignoring her tear-streaked face. She looked at him with mingled guilt and yearning, but he averted his gaze, too consumed by the meltdown of his carefully guarded life to meet her eyes. Within minutes, they retreated, leaving a cluster of photographers and reporters behind on the sidewalk. The entire incident, captured by dozens of cell phone videos, was already on its way to going viral, thanks to social media postings from various patrons. By the time Julian and Camilla reached his penthouse, the first wave of scandalous headlines had started popping up online. Julian Rothwell caught with Mistress pregnant wife confronts him at Le Serine. The Rothwell affair, a marriage in crisis, rich billionaires' double life exposed. Julian sank into his leather sofa, running both hands through his hair as he scanned the onslaught of notifications. He had PR people for crises like this, but could they contain the emotional wreckage? Camilla trembled, standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering skyline. She muttered, "I never wanted it to turn out like this. I swear." Julian let out a hollow laugh. And what did we expect? We were playing with fire. His mind whirled, trying to strategize the next steps. A statement? A press conference? Should he contact Serena directly or let the dust settle? One name floated repeatedly to the forefront of his mind: Alexander Pierce. An influential investor in Rothwell Holdings, Pierce was famously conservative regarding moral conduct. If Alexander caught wind of this scandal, and he undoubtedly would, there could be repercussions in business partnerships. Julian's entire empire was suddenly at risk because of his personal indiscretions. Camilla walked over to him, tears glittering in her eyes. She reached out a hand, but he pulled away. "I need time to think," he said curtly. Maybe it's best if you go. I need to handle this alone. Her face crumpled. She nodded, grabbed her purse, and hesitated, as if hoping for a gesture of reassurance. But none came. With a trembling sigh, Camilla left, the door closing quietly behind her. Julian gazed at the city lights, each one a reminder of his achievements. Tonight, those achievements felt hollow. His wife, pregnant with his child, had discovered his darkest secret. In the process, he had humiliated them both on a public stage. For the first time in his life, Julian was unsure if his money, power, and charm could stitch together the havoc he had unleashed. Even before sunrise, the world had turned upside down for Serena. She was holed up in a suite at her friend Margot's boutique hotel, ironically one that Camilla had designed months earlier. The heartbreak carved into her face made her unrecognizable. News outlets blared the scandal on every platform: television, tabloids, social media. A knock at her door stirred her from her daze. Margot entered, carrying a tray of breakfast Serena likely wouldn't touch. "You need to eat something," Margot said softly. Serena only sighed, placing a protective hand over her belly. Everything else could wait, but her child needed nourishment. She scrolled through her phone in a numb haze, ignoring messages and calls from relatives, including her father, Pierre Delacroix, who was outraged by the news. Her mother, still in France, had left tearful voicemails pleading for Serena to return home. But Serena felt paralyzed. She didn't want to face pitying eyes or the wave of condemnation that came with a public betrayal. By noon, a new headache emerged, the swarm of paparazzi that had already discovered her hideout. Margot had posted an innocent photo of the hotel's lobby weeks ago, tagging Serena. Now, unscrupulous paparazzi pieced together the clue and descended in droves. The hotel staff tried to maintain privacy, but a few guests complained about the intrusive photographers, forcing Margot to double security. Meanwhile, across town, Julian's empire was bracing for impact. Stock shares for Rothwell Holdings dipped slightly, though not catastrophically. The tabloids buzzed with speculation about the possibility of a divorce and the mammoth settlement that might follow. In his corner office, Julian sat in an emergency meeting with his senior management team and his top PR strategist, Brenda Calloway. Brenda was a razor-sharp communications expert who had handled everything from corporate takeovers to philanthropic controversies for Julian. But a personal affair was new territory, particularly one so public. "We need a statement," she said, scanning Julian's haunted expression. "Silence will only fuel more rumors. We have to address the scandal head-on." "And say what?" Julian asked, steepling his fingers. The overhead lights felt unbearably bright. "That I cheated on my pregnant wife and humiliated her in public?" Brenda exhaled. "We craft a message that doesn't confirm the details, but acknowledges a private matter that spilled into the public eye. We emphasize regret, respect for Serena's privacy, and a commitment to resolving personal issues away from the limelight. We also highlight the philanthropic commitments to shift the narrative away from scandal alone." Julian slumped in his chair. Part of him wanted to call Serena to beg for her forgiveness, but he knew she wouldn't pick up. She had every right to ignore him. The weight of his actions pressed on him like a choking vise. That evening, the official Rothwell Holdings press release went out. It read, "Mr. Julian Rothwell confirms that a personal dispute occurred on March 8th at a private restaurant. He and his wife, Serena Rothwell, respectfully request privacy during this difficult time as they address personal matters. Rothwell Holdings remains committed to its philanthropic and business goals. No further comment will be provided at this time." Reactions were mixed. Some saw the statement as a sanitized cop-out, typical of wealthy men caught in scandals. Others sympathized with Serena, who had become a visible representation of heartbreak. Meanwhile, Camilla Hawthorne faced her own social backlash, with her design clientele suddenly wary of the public spectacle. In a single night, the reputations of 3 people lay in ruin, ignited by a single spark of betrayal. Days turned into a blur. News cycles churned out every conceivable angle of the affair, and the rumor mill spun wildly. Was Camilla pregnant too? Was Serena planning a rapid divorce to claim half of Julian's fortune? The speculation was relentless, fueling both legitimate journalism and trashy gossip. Within the Rothwell Holdings boardrooms, tension rose as Alexander Pierce's representatives demanded an internal review of the scandal's impact. Serena, meanwhile, remained cloistered at Margot's hotel suite, her emotional state fragile. She alternated between tearful breakdowns and moments of cold determination. Every time she felt the baby move, she whispered promises of protection. It was no longer just about Julian's betrayal, it was about safeguarding her unborn child from the chaos. Margot tried to coax her friend into confiding in family or at least returning to her own residence to avoid the paparazzi. Serena, they're not going to leave, they're camped outside the hotel. Maybe we should leave town or even the country? She hinted at taking Serena back to the Delacroix family estate in Bordeaux, far from the prying American press. But Serena refused, her eyes flaring with a quiet resolve. I'm not going to hide. I did nothing wrong. At the same time, Julian grew more desperate to speak with her. He called, texted, and even left notes with the hotel concierge, all of which went ignored. Guilt and regret gnawed at him. He recognized the shallow justifications he'd used to start and continue the affair. He thought, maybe I was craving novelty? Maybe I was stressed and found solace in someone else's arms? None of these excuses would fix what he had done. Alexander Pierce summoned Julian to a private meeting at his penthouse suite, a lavish space with marble floors and panoramic views of the city. Tall, imposing, and stern, Pierce wasted no time in niceties. This scandal jeopardizes our upcoming project, he said, referencing an ambitious real estate complex that aimed to blend luxury living with community development. Investors are cautious. Your moral reputation was part of the deal, Julian bristled. I can handle the personal crisis, he assured, though his tone lacked confidence. I just need some time. Pierce's gaze hardened. Time is money in our world. Clean up your mess or I walk away. We both know that would be disastrous. The ultimatum struck a nerve. Julian realized that if Pierce withdrew his investment, the ripple effect could topple multiple ventures and cost thousands of jobs. The philanthropic side of him cringed at such a domino effect, but the purely business side recognized the immediate threat to his empire. As if orchestrated by fate, the doorbell rang, and one of Pierce's assistants led Camilla into the suite. She looked pale, visibly shaken. I had to come, she whispered, glancing nervously at Pierce. I can't get in touch with you, Julian. You're always in meetings, and your assistant blocked my calls. Pierce grimaced at her presence, but he allowed the meeting to continue in his luxurious living room. Camilla explained that a tabloid journalist had approached her family, offering a significant sum for exclusive details. She was torn between protecting Julian and herself. The pressure was immense, both financial and emotional. Julian felt trapped. On one hand, continuing any association with Camilla risked further scandal. On the other, cutting her off might provoke her or push her into selling stories for revenge or financial survival. The complicated knots of betrayal were tighter than ever. That night, after a long day of stonewalling the press and placating anxious investors, Julian found himself standing outside Margot's boutique hotel. A cluster of paparazzi lingered by the main entrance. He opted instead for a side door, slipping the doorman a generous tip to let him in. Everything about him screamed exhaustion, dark circles under his eyes, a rigid posture born of tension and guilt. He took the elevator to Serena's floor, ignoring the incredulous stares of a few guests who recognized him. At last, he stood before her suite, uncertain if she'd even open the door. Mustering courage, he knocked quietly. Margot answered, her expression icy. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she said. But noticing the slump in Julian's shoulders and the bouquet of soft pink lilies in his hand, Serena's favorite Margot allowed him inside. She gestured for him to wait in the living area. "If she wants to talk to you, that's her choice," Margot muttered. She disappeared into the adjacent bedroom. For a few agonizing minutes, Julian stood alone, taking in the discreet, elegant furnishings. There were traces of Serena's presence, her perfume on a side table, a half-finished maternity book on the armchair. Guilt gnawed at him, a constant reminder of how he'd upended their life. Eventually, Serena emerged, wearing a loose-fitting maternity dress. She looked tired, yet her gaze was steeled with resolve. Margot hovered nearby, but Serena lifted a hand, indicating she wanted to talk to Julian alone. Reluctantly, Margot withdrew. An awkward silence filled the room. Julian carefully set the lilies down. "You look, well," he started lamely. Serena merely nodded. "Say what you need to say." "I'm not sure how much longer I can stand to look at you." He took a deep breath. "Serena, I'm sorry," he began. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I can't stand this, knowing how much I hurt you. I never wanted it to become." He trailed off, struggling to articulate the scope of his remorse. Tears gathered in Serena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You betrayed me. While I'm pregnant. That's a cruelty I never thought you were capable of." She paused, inhaling shakily. "Was it just once, or was it months of sneaking around?" Julian grimaced. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It went on longer than it should have. The confession ripped through the final shreds of hope Serena harbored. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you for your honesty, I guess," she said bitterly. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to feel your child move and wonder if the father even wants us anymore?" A pained expression crossed Julian's face. "I do want you. I do. I never intended to leave you. Camilla was." He rubbed his temples at a loss for words. "I wasn't looking for something else. It happened, but it's over now. You're the one I love, Serena." She laughed, a mirthless sound. "Love? You think an affair is how you express love?" She closed her eyes. "Maybe you're sorry you got caught," she said quietly. "Because this is humiliating not just for you, but for me, for our families." A long pause. He stood helplessly, tears pooling in his own eyes now. "Serena, I'm asking for a chance to make this right. I'm ready to do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes." Her gaze bore into him, torn between fury and heartbreak. "I don't know if it's possible to forgive this," she whispered. "But for the sake of our child, I'm willing to consider hearing you out. Not tonight, though. I'm too angry, too hurt." Julian lowered his head. "I understand. I'll respect your space. But please don't shut me out completely. If not for me, then for the baby." He hesitated a moment, then quietly left, the door closing behind him like a final exclamation point on the pain between them. In the following weeks, Serena struggled to find her footing. Paparazzi continued to hound her, though Margot managed to arrange private transportation whenever she had to step out for doctor's appointments. The stress weighed heavily on her, physically and emotionally. Amid her turmoil, she found unexpected solace in her unborn baby's movements, tiny flutters that reminded her she had a new life to protect. She began writing letters to her child in a small journal, describing her hopes, her fears, and her uncertainty about the future with Julian. Each word served as a form of therapy, helping her process the betrayal. Meanwhile, Julian attempted to extinguish the fires of scandal scorching his business interests. Alexander Pierce had offered him a dangerous ultimatum: rectify the scandal or watch vital investments vanish. The pressure to project an image of stability was immense. His PR strategist, Brenda Calloway, insisted that he appear publicly with Serena, even if just for a charity event, to quell rumors of an imminent divorce. But Serena refused any staged appearances. She agreed only to a private meeting with Pierce to discuss the philanthropic aspects of the real estate project. At that meeting, hosted in a discreet lounge of a five-star hotel, Pierce witnessed firsthand the tension between Julian and Serena. She barely looked at him. Her posture was stiff, as if she were enduring an unpleasant chore rather than cooperating with her husband's business. After the meeting, Serena confronted Pierce alone. "I respect your investments, Mr. Pierce, and I understand you're worried about your money. But I won't be a prop for Julian's image." Pierce, momentarily taken aback by her forthrightness, nodded slowly. He apologized if his business concerns trivialized her personal suffering. He assured her that any project decisions would not overshadow the well-being of the Rothwell family. During this stressful period, Camilla vanished from the public eye, retreating to a family home in upstate New York. Whispers circulated that she was considering a tell-all interview to salvage her tarnished reputation, but so far, nothing materialized. Julian sometimes wondered if she was waiting for a better offer or a moment when she could cause maximum damage. Each day, Julian reached out to Serena, desperate for updates on her health, the baby, or any sign that she might be open to reconciliation. She responded with brief, impersonal texts, mainly regarding medical appointments or essential financial paperwork. It was clear she had no desire for personal dialogue beyond the bare necessities. In the 18th week after the scandal, Serena counted them like the passing of seasons. She felt her baby kick more strongly than ever. A wave of emotion overwhelmed her. She realized she couldn't live the rest of her life in limbo, perpetually avoiding public scrutiny, harboring resentments that might poison her child's upbringing. She decided it was time to make a crucial decision: either attempt to heal with Julian or seek a definitive separation. But the path to either choice was fraught with pitfalls: the unyielding paparazzi, the meddling corporate investors, and a mistress who could re-emerge at any moment to share her side of the story. Destiny had set a stage where love, betrayal, power, and innocence collided. Now, it was time to see how the pieces would be rearranged. On a sunny afternoon, Serena stood on the terrace of Margot's penthouse suite, absorbing the city skyline. She gently caressed her growing belly, pondering the choice she had to make. Each passing day brought her closer to her due date, and the baby's presence felt like both a ticking clock and a guiding compass. She considered the possibility of divorce. Her lawyers had outlined the steps she could take, from prenuptial clauses to custody arrangements. Financially, she wouldn't struggle. Her own inheritance was substantial, and child support from Julian would likely be massive. The bigger question was whether her heart could handle the permanent scar of cutting Julian off. Despite the betrayal, part of her still yearned for the man she once believed he was. That evening, she requested a quiet meeting at her OB/GYN's office, inviting Julian to join her. He arrived on time, wearing a reserved expression. In the examination room, Serena lay back for an ultrasound. Julian stood nearby, silent but watchful. When the image of their baby appeared on the monitor, tears welled in both their eyes. The doctor pointed out the heartbeat, the little limbs, the signs of a healthy pregnancy. For a moment, Serena and Julian locked eyes, sharing the wonder that overshadowed their animosity. Once the appointment ended, the doctor discreetly stepped out, leaving them alone with the ultrasound images. Serena broke the silence. She's healthy. That's all that matters right now. Julian swallowed hard. She? He echoed, eyes softening. Serena nodded, placing the ultrasound prints gently into her purse. Yes, a girl. Julian's voice wavered. I wish I could be here for every moment. I know I ruined that chance. He paused, inhaling the sterile scent of the medical room. But if you'd let me, I want to be by your side as much as I can. Not for appearances, not for business. For us, for her. Serena studied his face. She noticed new lines of stress near his eyes, the faint shadow of a beard that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. I'm not promising forgiveness. And I'm definitely not promising to forget, she said carefully. But maybe I'm willing to take small steps. For her sake, if nothing else. Relief flooded Julian's features. Thank you, he whispered. Anything you need, financial support, medical bills, nursery preparations, I'm here. Their conversation felt like walking on eggshells, overshadowed by wounds still raw and unhealed. Nevertheless, it was progress. Outside, in the corridor, paparazzi snapped photos as they exited, but this time, Julian shielded Serena from the intrusive flashes, gently ushering her into the elevator. Instead of parting ways, they rode down together, enveloped in a tense hush that also held a glimmer of hope. Back at Margot's penthouse, Serena recounted the experience to her friend. Seeing the baby on the screen, I felt something shift. Maybe it was the look on his face. Margot, ever protective, frowned slightly. Just be careful. People can change momentarily under stress. Make sure his remorse is real and lasting. For the next few days, Serena allowed Julian to accompany her to baby-related appointments, pediatrician consultations, Lamez classes, and child safety workshops. Each shared activity was a tentative step toward rebuilding the shattered bridge, even as the memory of his betrayal lurked like a ghost in every corner. By the 8th month of her pregnancy, Serena managed to carve out a semblance of peace. She decided to move back into the Rothwell mansion, albeit in a separate wing from Julian's. The estate boasted expansive gardens and a personal security staff that could fend off the press. Margot supported the move reluctantly, but she understood Serena's need for space and privacy to prepare for childbirth. Julian greeted Serena at the entrance, overshadowed by the gilded arches of their opulent home. He carried her bag silently, a mixture of anticipation and guilt etched on his face. Their arrangement was clear. She wasn't returning as his doting wife. She was returning for the child's well-being. That line was drawn firmly. Despite the tension, they found small moments to reconnect. Over breakfast, Julian would inquire about her cravings, blueberry waffles, decaf cappuccinos, and arrange for them to be prepared. At night, he'd check in on her, offering a gentle goodnight, never crossing into her private suite without invitation. In parallel, Julian sought therapy for himself, recognizing the need to confront the reasons behind his affair. He also convinced Serena to join couples counseling, ensuring that if they were to remain in each other's orbits, they would at least do so with professional guidance. The sessions were painful, forcing them to dissect vulnerabilities and regrets. But they persevered, fueled by the impending arrival of their daughter. Meanwhile, the media slowly shifted its focus. A new scandal involving a Hollywood actress overshadowed the Rothwell affair, granting them some reprieve. Camilla stayed out of the spotlight, rumored to be traveling abroad. Whether she was truly gone or simply lying low, no one knew. But her absence allowed Serena and Julian the breathing room they desperately needed. As the due date approached, Serena woke one night to a sharp contraction. Pain shot through her midsection, and she clutched the bed sheets. She tried to steady her breath, recalling the Lamaze exercises. Another contraction hit, sharper than before. She reached for her phone and, without hesitation, dialed Julian. Within minutes, he was in her suite, wide-eyed and half-dressed in pajama pants and a t-shirt. "Hospital," she gasped. "Now." He sprang into action, helping her downstairs, instructing the staff to bring the car around. The drive was a blur of speeding lights and anxious whispers of reassurance. Upon arrival at the hospital, Serena was whisked into a private maternity suite. Julian held her hand through the worst of the labor pains, whispering repeated apologies between words of encouragement. Hours later, a tiny cry echoed in the room. The nurse placed a baby girl, wriggling and pink, into Serena's arms. Tears of relief, joy, and heartbreak poured from Serena's eyes. Julian gazed at their daughter, overwhelmed by a sense of awe and responsibility. She was perfect. A new life untainted by scandal or bitterness, a symbol of hope and a reminder of every consequence leading up to this moment. They named her Aurélie Rothwell, a name Serena had chosen for its French roots, meaning golden. In that hospital room, a fragile truce was forged between husband and wife. Their child was the golden thread that could stitch together a future, though the path ahead would be uncertain, marked by both possibility and the lingering shadows of what had been lost. The days following Aurélie's birth were a swirl of midnight feedings, soft lullabies, and cautious steps around unspoken resentments. In the warm glow of the nursery, painted in a gentle cream palette, Serena found herself smiling at life's tiny miracles, the way Aurélie's fingers clasped hers, the soft cooing that replaced the hush of heartbreak. Julian, for his part, was hands-on, changing diapers, preparing bottles, and marveling at his daughter's every facial expression. Counseling sessions continued. If anything, the arrival of Aurélie heightened the stakes. Each session forced them to confront the question, could they rebuild trust for the sake of their family? Or would the memories of betrayal forever stand as an impenetrable wall? The therapist pushed them to communicate openly, to share anxieties and regrets. Slowly, they unearthed the root causes: Julian's fear of stagnation, Serena's unvoiced insecurities, and a spiraling set of poor decisions that led to the affair. Serena still couldn't ignore the pang of pain whenever she recalled the night at La Serine. But day by day, she saw small shifts in Julian. He turned down night calls, refusing to leave home after 7 p.m. unless absolutely critical. He publicly rebuked gossip magazines that tried to profit off Aurélie's pictures. He even established a new charitable fund in Aurélie's name, focusing on maternal and child health clinics worldwide. Some called it a PR move, but Serena saw sincerity behind the gesture. Despite the glimmer of hope, rumors continued to swirl. The public was eager for an update. Would the Rothwells finalize a divorce or present a united front? Camilla remained a wild card, her silence both reassuring and ominous. Serena's father, Pierre Delacroix, pressed for a meeting to discuss the broader family ramifications. "Your reputation matters, my dear," he reminded her over a phone call. "Please ensure your child doesn't become fodder for more gossip." One evening, while Aurélie slept in the nursery, Serena found Julian in the study, gazing at an old photo of their wedding day. He looked up, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "We were so happy," he murmured. "I ruined that." Serena stood beside him, arms folded. "We can't change what happened," she said softly, "but maybe we can decide what happens now." He turned to her, voice quivering. "Do you think there's a real chance for us?" It was an honest plea, stripped of arrogance or pretense. She hesitated, her mind replaying memories of both heartbreak and kindness. "Maybe," she said at last, "if we keep working at it. If we're both honest about our faults and our needs." He reached for her hand, and she allowed it, though the gesture was still tinged with uncertainty. In that quiet moment, they shared the gravity of what it meant to have a second chance knowing. It wouldn't erase the past, but it might carve out a new narrative. A tender, fragile peace settled between them, one that would require continuous effort to maintain. In the end, the story of Julian, Serena, and Camilla reminds us that even colossal wealth can't shield a person from the consequences of betrayal. Through heartbreak and scandal, Julian learned that true power isn't found in boardrooms or bank balances, it's in the bonds we forge with those we love. Serena discovered her own strength, refusing to let public judgment dictate her choices. And baby Aurelie became a beacon of hope, the promise that even shattered dreams can give birth to new beginnings. Thank you for watching and listening to this dramatic saga of love, betrayal, and fragile redemption. If you found yourself swept up in the twists and turns, please like this video, share it with anyone who loves a gripping real-life drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories filled with shock, intrigue, and heartfelt moments. Stay tuned, more captivating tales await.